not able to come to New York, so I decided to have at least such a background.
Yeah, that's unfortunate, but well, this is the world we live in.
Yeah,
For the
definitely.
moment, we also have a limited access to that hall. It's only one person per delegation that is going there. So if I'm there, none of my officers can come in. So I have to leave, and then they can come in. So it's pretty complicated. It's pretty complicated. Well, hopefully we'll get back to normalcy towards the end of the year.
Yeah, let's hope so. Has everyone, like, has a lot of people vaccinated already in New York?
Yes, yes, that is true.
Before we start, I just wanted to ask maybe one short question because I tend to see that people who switch to online benefit more from it than from offline because there are lots of meetings that could have been just an email or an online call. How would you personally rate? Would you like to make a hybrid format in a way that you would stick to the online meetings and offline meetings, or how this works in the UN headquarters better?
Well, like in everything, there are certain benefits, of course, because it's possible to have online meeting like this one, where all of you are in different places and we can talk. This is an obviously a benefit that technology brought here. But diplomacy is only personal. I do not believe, and I can argue it endlessly, online diplomacy does not exist. Diplomacy, first and foremost, is trust with your interlocutor, particularly in this complex environment that we call the multilateralism. So, in that sense, unless you meet somebody in person, it is very difficult. It is impossible. Now, for those of us who already known each other for some time, we don't need to meet. Would love to, but if there is no possibility, we can text each other, we can call each other, we can decide things because we have years of knowing each other and the trust that's been established. But when you need to get to know someone, talking to a screen does not give you anything. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
So who would be moderating it? Lika, would that be you or Ramis or Esma?
Esma and we have Nina moderating actually.
Okay, all right. So I'll be in your hands. You are the bosses, and you tell when we start, and then we can start.
We will change time.
Maybe we should wait some 5 more minutes, so to let everybody come in. It's sometimes it's difficult with all these connections.
Yes, and
Sure.
we're having live on Facebook, so whoever can't join us because UN Youth Delegates sometimes have tricky work and study schedule. So whoever can join us right now can watch us, follow us, and also ask questions on Facebook so that we then discuss them here.
Okay.
I saw Tamar Kalandia joined. Is this someone from our youth delegates or?
Hello everyone, and no, I'm not, but I plan to be still because I'm still a school student, but I registered on this event and I'm looking forward to hearing from you.
Okay. Hi, Roman.
Hi, Asma.
How are you doing?
I'm very fine, thanks. How are you?
As well.
Cool. So much familiar faces. I'm gonna turn my face on in a few seconds.
The Ukrainian delegates change so fast.
All right. I guess we will stick to time and start. Welcome, everyone. Welcome, Ambassador Kakha, and thank you for being our first guest in Youth in Diplomacy Talks today. My name is Lika Torikashvili, and I'm very excited. I'm very excited that our network is launching our first project. My colleague Ramiz Bakhtiar will tell you more about the network and the idea behind it. But the exciting part is that we officially registered 3 weeks ago. Although we've been working on organizing the network and working with each other for roughly a year already. So it's been a lot of work to put everything in place and finally register a youth organization that would unite all the UN youth delegates from all over the world. And we're really excited that you, Ambassador Kakha, is our first guest in Youth and Diplomacy Talks, which is a project that we feel is very needed and really important at this point in time, especially if we want to actually realize Resolution 2250 and put it in action. It's really important to bridge UN key decision makers and young people, UN youth delegates, and have the opportunity to talk to each other, to ask questions, to have a dialogue. And also, as you mentioned, Ambassador Kakha, to learn about diplomacy and to have a real life diplomacy lesson, which you will never learn at school. It is very interesting and important for all of us, previous and current UN youth delegates, future leaders, and current leaders, to learn more about the career paths of UN ambassadors, ask them questions, and get inspired to follow their path and learn from their lessons. So that's actually the reason behind this project. Youth in Diplomacy Talks has two components. First one is conversations with current and previous UN ambassadors. And the second component, which we haven't launched yet, but it's work in progress. The second component is workshops for young people all over the world on diplomacy, communication, and leadership. And with that, I want to also welcome participants who are watching us live. You can ask questions, and in the Q&A part, we will raise those questions and ask them to the ambassador. And with that, I would like to give the floor to Ramiz Bakhtiar.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much, Lika. Thank you, Ambassador, for being here today. And thanks, my fellow UNU delegates, for joining us today, for registering for our first talk. I hope that it's going to be engaging and informative discussion today. My name is Ramiz Bakhtiar. I was Afghanistan's first youth representative to the United Nations in 2018 and 19. During my mandate, I briefed at the United Nations Security Council beside other activities. It was a unique opportunity to speak there and also engage in a discussion with world leaders. To tell you more about this network, in August of 2020, together with Lika, we started working on the idea to establish a platform, a network for all former and current UNU delegates, where they will all come together and work together, because there was no platform, and there's no platform other than this network for UNU delegates to work together after their mandate. And so we felt the need, and we saw an opportunity to step up and make a difference and start working on creating a network like that. We were aware that former UNU delegates in previous years had tried to establish a network like this, but it was not easy. It was a lot of challenge bringing young leaders from different parts of the world to work together, because everyone is busy with their jobs or their life or studies. But we took the challenge, and it was during this global COVID pandemic. So we had an opportunity where everyone was quarantining to connect with UNU delegates and bring them on board and tell them about this idea and see what was their thoughts and their vision for creating a platform like this. So Lika and I designed a consultation framework where we wanted to talk to former and current UNU delegates. And in that consultation process, we engaged nearly 100 UNU delegates from over 40 plus countries and from different generations. We had very long conversations on our goal, on our mission, on what is that is supposed to happen once we create this network, what is expected from this network, and what were the challenges that we wanted to address, because we knew that UNU delegates do not have the opportunity to be involved, to be connected, and to be engaged in the development agenda, in sustainable development goals, or at the work of the UN after their mandate. So there was a lot of potential that was largely wasted after a UNU delegate's mandate is over. And we did not want to let that continue and happening. So that was the purpose of the network. In the global network of UNU delegates that we call UNU Delegates Alumni Network, our vision is to be a key partner to the UN and UN agencies in different countries and all development agencies in engaging young people meaningfully in the development agenda, in the work that they're doing, because the world needs us. The world needs young people's energy. The world needs young people's involvement in their action. And our vision is underpinned by a lot of experience and expertise. And that expertise and background is very unique and diverse and inclusive. And we have members in the network from different countries today, from different generations. And I think that's very important for us, for young people, to be able to work together and find ways to collaborate and work together, because today's complicated problems in the world cannot be solved unless we all come together and address it together and have a platform where we can share ideas, learn from each other, listen to each other, talk to each other, and help to each other. That is the vision for this network. And we're very happy that we have the support of a big number of UNU delegates from our generation, from 2018 and 19, from previous years, and from current UNU delegates that are coming from different countries. It was a huge learning opportunity, and we hope that we will keep engaging and involving more UNU delegates in this network to work together and learn from each other. Thank you, Ambassador, for being here again, and thanks, my fellow UNU delegates.
Thank you, Ramis and Lika, for inspiring start of today. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Your Excellency, first of all, and our dear fellow UN youth delegates, both former and current, and also dear audience who are watching us online. Today, this is our inaugural event of the UN, of the Youth in Diplomacy Talks series, and it's a great honor for us to start and host today the permanent representative of Georgia to the United Nations, His Excellency Mr. Kakha imnadze, who has been appointed a permanent representative in 2013. And he has been for decades in the diplomatic career and diplomatic office. He's a career diplomat starting from 1989 and going through all different positions, having decades of experience in both international and national fields of international relations, security, in fields of consultancy, both from public sector and private, and the civil sector, the NGO sectors as well. And we are looking forward to your questions from the audience. And now I will, without further ado, pass the floor to Ambassador Kakha. Ambassador, you have about 20 minutes, and we are looking forward to listening to you.
Thank you very much, Esma, for this introduction, and thank you, Lika and Ramis, and thank you all for having me here. My gratitude to this network. It is indeed a privilege to participate in this inaugural meeting. I'll be speaking in my personal capacity. This way, I believe we can discuss broader issues of interest, while of course I'll be ready to give you my national position as well, should that be of interest. But I'm sure in your discussions there are at least 3 youth delegates from Georgia, as I see, and knowing 2 of them, how hard they worked in their time, I'm sure they can brief the peers on Georgia's position. So therefore, I think that it will be more interesting if I come from my personal capacity now. I don't want to give you a lengthy speech, and I would rather have interactive dialogue. This will be, I think, more engaging and more useful for you as well as for me. But to set the stage, let me throw in a few ideas and observations, comments, if you will. Firstly, I want to congratulate you on the idea of the network. This is a wonderful idea. It's a very important and useful initiative. Not only because you are young leaders, you are the ones who will be at the helm tomorrow. Besides, the world that my generation is in charge now is not only something that was given to us or bequeathed by our parents as a heritage, but it's also something that we borrowed from you, the generation to come. So with that, what is the world that we live in now, and what are the tools that we have? Let's look at them from global perspective. We are talking UN after all, and this is the place where the entire world comes together. So what is it that we have? What brings us together? What tears us apart? Is that the challenges or perspectives In other words, what are those global commons? What are the global commons of today? And then perhaps let's look whether we have tools to address them adequately globally. In other words, what is the global governance of today? So global commons and global governance. When we talk about global commons, something that is very common today, of course, is the current pandemic, COVID-19. And the COVID-19 made everything more vivid, more conspicuous. Existing deficiencies that we had became more conspicuous, whether it's health or health infrastructure, exchange of relevant information or cooperation, nationalism, called the vaccine nationalism that we found, eventually inequality that has been around, has become more conspicuous. Now, talking about inequality, this is another global common that we have, and inequality is in fact the root cause of everything within the national state, region, or even globally, the wealth distribution, a root cause and source of not only various humanitarian issues, but of violence and ultimately of conflicts that we have. And this leads to another global common, which is peace and security. And peace and security means not only the so-called traditional conflict that have been lingering based on geopolitics, but it's also ideology. It's also migration, say the range, how it goes. And then we go to new commons. The new commons, such as digital commons. And digital contains both, and this common contains both benefit as well as threats. Cyber, artificial intelligence, information and media platform as a means of communication, association and influence, and also as a weapon because of its misuse. And perhaps lastly, climate, which is another huge global common, because this is something that can, similar to pandemic, suddenly put everybody and everything on the same level, disregarding their level of development, disregarding inequality. It is something that suddenly can affect everything and everybody. And when I say climate, I don't mean climate change only, but also what leads to it too, which includes the issues related to the loss of biodiversity because of overconsumption. This is the place where a cause becomes also a result, and we enter into this unfortunate vicious circle. Just to name it, that overfishing, for instance. Overfishing, in fact, contributes more to adverse effect of climate and climate change than emission from industry. So these are few global commons that I mentioned, the more salient ones. How these global commons can be addressed? Obviously through global cooperation, in other words, global governance. And do we have that global governance, and do we have those tools in our disposal? Of course, we have the United Nations, which is a global common in itself. It is the place where everybody comes together. And we have Agenda 2030. We also have various other international organizations, be that under the UN umbrella or separate. And all of them have one thing in common. We give them the teeth. So we, as the member state, make them strong and we make them weak. So if one of these organizations are not performing to an expectation of the society, it is not only the fault of certain bureaucracy in the organization, which is a minor issue here, but also it is the fault of the owners of these organizations. In other words, the membership. So what I'm trying to say is that we do have the framework. What is lacking at times, and in most cases, is the political need, political will to make this click and work together. So when we talk about global commons and global governance, there is another issue that comes in. It's not only the international organizations when it comes to global governance. In the international organizations, we do have the states as actors. We also have to look at the private sector in general. And in other words, public-private partnerships. After all, you all know very well Agenda 2030 and SDGs, and we do need financing for the SDGs. And the financing does come from the private sector. That's where the money is. But when we talk about global governance, there are enterprises in private sector that are so big that they're changing the global governance. They are the ones. And these are, well, big data or big tech companies, big pharma companies, other huge companies in retail. So with the state or the government, there is a social contract that the public has with them. And that social contract ends with elections. You can elect them, you can re-elect them, you can change them through that. Now with the other, there is just an end user agreement, which hardly anybody understands or even reads. There is, of course, the possibility of litigation through the same state as a protector in this case, but that can also be influenced by the big company interest. So this is the picture in a nutshell. What I see, that we have indeed global commons that in a way are not changed from the ones that we used to have before, but certain deficiencies have come up, become more conspicuous, and we need to address. Global commons need a global response, in other words, global governance, where we do have these two players with traditional institutions that do lack sometimes teeth because of the lack of political will on the part of the players, and that means all of us in general, the member states. And we do have a component that comes in that has really changed the world. These are the major private enterprises that are really global, and that the enterprises even determine certain modes of behavior, whether that's society or the groups or even ideology. So this is the picture, and we live in this environment. The world has been sort of put on hold, and as we say in the United Nations now, we need to restart it and build back better and build back forward. And of course, every crisis also is an opportunity that can be used. But the choices that we need to make are the choices that need to be made now. And these choices are to be made not just by my generation, but also by yours, by you all, the youth, because in every country of the world, you are the force to reckon with. Whether some likes it or not, you are a powerful force indeed. And to finish again, my brief introduction, once again, I want to congratulate on this network, because if every leader of a country or a big corporation went through UN corridors, having a term of service there as an expert or ambassador, I believe the world today would have been much different, because UN is indeed a place where even adversaries work together. This is the place where everybody relates to each other. Of course, everybody tries to promote or protect their own country's interest, but to start with, they need to establish trust of their colleagues, trust of their peers. And that leads me to your network. Through that network, if you work together and establish that trust among each other, in the years to come, you will be much better placed to address these global commons and any new ones for the sake of your generation and for the sake of next one that you have to pass the torch so that we continue the evolution of the humankind. I want to stop at this because I can really talk endlessly on various issues, and we UN Agenda 2030, as a good friend of mine and then our president of the General Assembly, Peter Thompson, very aptly termed, it's the manual for humanity's survival. And that is a huge, huge manual. That we can talk about that manual endlessly. If we go into peace and security, we can talk about that also endlessly. If we talk about, there is not a single trait of human life that is not being discussed in the United Nations at a different format or levels. So I want to stop here and listen to you and take your questions to see what is your particular interest at this given moment, and have it more interactive, this discussion, and try to answer them being well, like not being politically correct. Let me put it this way, as much as this could be possible.
Thank you, Ambassador, very much for this insightful address. I would really underline what you have said about the role of the private sector in sustainable development, in human rights today, as actually one of our former UNYDS and the members of the network, Ivan, who I think is not here today with us, but he has mentioned and he has said that, and put it rightly, that if companies have rights, then the ecosystems also shall. And it's, of course, all these challenges do affect us in some way or the other, meaning the climate change and the pandemic, but these, again, also exacerbate the existing inequalities and show that some countries are hit more and some less to some extent. And I think Georgia is also one of the good examples of this very, very visual one. So the way we'll proceed now is that there will be a few questions from the moderator, meaning me, and then I will turn over to the audience. So my first question would be, as we here are today for a dialogue, and also we want to hear Your Excellency more from you on your personal experience of becoming a diplomat and of being a diplomat, because you went through all possible stages of career, starting from internships and from deputy chair of the department and to the deputy head of the mission, and then to being already a permanent representative. How did you make the choice of entering the diplomatic sphere, the international relations, and what kind of choices did you have to make along the way? And also because the system has changed while you were in the foreign relations, how did it affect your work? And the demand on you, let's say the pressure that you were and have been facing all through?
That's an interesting question. And how did it start? Actually, it started. I was in the high school. I was fascinated with history, fascinated looking at international relations. So I enrolled as an intern back in the days. It was possible. It was still the Soviet Union, the country that no longer exists. I was born in that country. Georgia was one of the republics. But at the end of the 80s, some transformations started, and that allowed me as a student to be at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs as an intern. So I enrolled as an intern in 1989, and shortly after, the legislation was flexible enough that it gave me possibility to become part-time, while in the first half of the day, in the morning, I was a student at the university. In the afternoon, I could have been in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs working part-time, and the Georgian Ministry of Foreign Affairs was very small in numbers. It was part of a much larger system. And then the transformation came overnight. One day, the Soviet Union disappeared, which was unexpected, I must say. Maybe some wanted, but nobody ever thought that that would happen, but that happened. And we woke up in a completely new world, not only us in Georgia, but the rest of the world. And from what I know from history and from my elder friends, the United Nations also. Suddenly, one permanent member, a huge nuclear power, was gone. And on its place, several appeared. So that was a momentous occasion. And for me, being a young diplomat at that time, me and my generation who were at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and suddenly the Ministry of Foreign Affairs started to grow. We all had to learn while at work. I remember how we went to a stationery shop and bought some files, put the names on top of those files. I was entrusted with the relations with the Western Europe at that moment. My colleagues were covering other parts of the world. So we were putting down the names, like in my case, like France, Germany, United Kingdom, Belgium, and there was nothing in it, in those files. And we were making the first phone calls, establishing first diplomatic relations. Those were really exciting times. And then came the very first embassies, very first missions that we as a country opened, and my generation was the first batch of diplomats that were sent there. Now, throughout these times, I must say that there were moments when I kind of regretted that I stayed in diplomacy. If I had gone to private sector and there were some offers, probably I would have done much better in terms of wealth. But diplomacy is something that once you are in, it is such a contagious disease that there is no vaccine for that at all. It stays with you all the time. And many diplomats will relate to the same thing. So whether you are actively for that moment or when you retire, that thing always stays with you, because it is a fascinating world of relating and working with colleagues from different parts, where you're trying to explain them what you stand for, what are your values, but that can only be done if you understand their values. So you need to think sometimes out of box, because it is so easy telling you that, well, this is what I think, this is my position, clear, and I won't budge it. That's easy. What is important to really see the world from the eyes of your interlocutor, and even more difficult to see the world from the eyes of your adversary. And I say adversary, I don't say enemy, because that concept changes. And as difficult as it may sound now, if we look at history, there's been countries that have been age-old enemies with each other, and then they have turned into partners, into allies. The two world wars are very good example of that, and even before. But of course, there are certain animosity and conflicts that are much deeper than the geopolitics that enters the realm of even national psychology and history, and they're very difficult to resolve. But then again, it's the people, and if people talk to each other, it is possible to have that change come. Becoming diplomat, there is not a single university in the world or a book that can produce a diplomat as a such. We have medical schools that give a very good medical education, but then for you to become a good doctor, you do need a practice, and this is what is happening. Same is with diplomacy. There is no such profession, no education that any of the universities in the world gives you as a diplomat. Some can be historians, some can be psychologists, political science, as we say today, international relations, you name it. But some of the best diplomats have been people who've been engineers, even doctors, musicians. Some of you may not know or may know, there was a Secretary General of NATO. Actually, when I was sent to Brussels to represent my country, we didn't have missions back in 1994. NATO was still at 16, and other countries were allowed to open liaison offices, so I was that liaison officer. Secretary General of NATO was a Belgian, Willy Klaas. Now, when Willy resigned, he continued what he had done earlier. He was the wonderful conductor of an orchestra. Of course, Willy has been a politician and he's done many things in life, but one of his first education was music. So before becoming Secretary General, he was minister of his own country. As a matter of fact, today is the birthday of my elder friend and mentor and the former minister of foreign affairs of Georgia, Irakli Menagarishvili, a great diplomat that we have. I mean, he's retired from active service, but he is a great diplomat. He turned 70 today, a medical doctor. That was his first background. And he's been a minister of foreign affairs for a long time. And that was very interesting time of building the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. And we worked together, and he's an elder friend of mine. And it is always an honor to recall the moments when I worked for him and under him and with him in different parts of my career. So you see, it all depends on what you want, and basically your openness to the rest of the world and your acceptance of the possibility that other views exist and you are not the ultimate truth. Given that, if you're interested, of course, diplomacy is something that is for you. The path will vary, whether you start as an intern or as a recruit, young in a ministry, or directly at an international organization. That would change from person to person. But beware, once you are in, it will be very difficult to get out. But once you're in, you will be in a very fascinating world.
It was very fascinating indeed what you have actually detailed about creating a ministry from scratch. I'm sure it is not an easy thing, and it must have been very, very confusing times then. And what we see with diplomacy, actually, we do see this even with our network, that once we have become youth delegates, there always has been around this thought that we should continue somehow and prolong our relationship with the UN, with the international community in a different ways. And this is why this idea has been always around. And finally, I hope it's in a good hands at this point. And I just was wondering also if there is a similar network of already established former and current UN ambassadors, diplomats, senior diplomats, and if you, Ambassador Kakha, are involved there somehow.
Actually, there is. This is an informal. We call it. Well, it's not quite informal. It's not as registered as a legal entity, I believe, but I never thought whether we need one, or maybe it is. We call it International Association of Permanent Representatives. And that was an idea that was born some time ago, before my coming to UN to serve my country. And that association, we have our chat group. That association involves ambassadors who are both current and previous ones. And that's a very useful tool, not only of socializing with each other, but also keeping track of each other. And that network is very useful network. That network allows us to practically open doors in every country through our colleagues for our togetherness. This is an unofficial network, of course. It has nothing to do with the countries and the country policies. It's not it's for the exchange of information and for keeping in touch. There is no formal work that is done through that network, but we do have within that network a very good tradition when in September we all get together in our traditional boat cruise with the Secretary General, with the families, and that builds the trust and relations. So that kind of a network exists. It's an informal network, but informal networks are very important. Now, your network does have a chance to be not only informal, but to be formalized in a way. And that's up to you to decide, since you've done so much work, what Ramiz and Lika were talking, that there's been ideas before, but now you finally registered it, and there are more and more colleagues of yours that are becoming members of this network. Well, why not try to register it also as a non-government organization through ECOSOC, and have you participate in various meetings where the civil society participation is possible, because that will be only added value, I personally think, to our work, because we always benefited from participation of youth delegates. In fact, I believe we can do even more. It is good that the Secretary General has a special representative with regard to the youth, but I would go even further. It will be good if Secretary General has one of the Assistant Secretary Generals who will be entrusted with the matter of youth, so have it a little bit of a higher degree, and the office to be much larger. But then again, it's not something that can happen overnight, but for various reasons, including the financial and certain bureaucracy that unfortunately exists in every organization coming from the member states to start with. But your network, the network can become very, very handy in that.
It was very interesting, and thank you for the advice regarding the ECOSOC. Speaking of upgrading, let's say, the UN Youth Envoy's mandate to the position of the Assistant Secretary, I was, in your opinion on that, I was wondering if Georgia has lobbied something similar, or what in general does Georgia lobby and work for at the UN? I'm sure there are a lot of people watching us who are not so much familiar with Georgian politics, because unfortunately, as it's a small country, and it's, let's say, it's still middle income country, it's not considered too poor and too rich to be globally famous. So I was wondering, what are main priorities of the Georgian advocacy in the UN and about the UN?
Well, we're entering now the national realm. The Georgian priorities. We are a small country indeed. We are a country who has its own sovereignty infringed upon, and this is one issue, of course, that we are constantly working in the United Nations. But apart from that, because UN is a global forum, and because we are so much interconnected, we are engaged in a plethora of issues. Human rights, where we've always been active, financing for development, other development issues. For the moment, we are on board of UN Women, and this is a very important issue for us, and we represent our region. This is how it is done. I'm facilitating, together with my colleague from Philippines, modalities on the trafficking in person this year. Last year, I was co-facilitator, together with my good friend and colleague from Benin, of the HLPF and ECOSOC review process. The year before, together with my colleague from Thailand, we were the ones who negotiated the political declaration on the universal health coverage, a very important, and I always call probably the most meaningful one that I've personally been involved with, because that was in relation to public health, and that had happened incidentally 2 years, or rather a year and a half, before the world was stopped by the current pandemic. Earlier than that, I was again co-facilitator, together with my colleague from United Arab Emirates, of the Security Council reform. So all these areas that I mentioned, those were the areas where I was there because of the UN peculiarity in a personal capacity as an ambassador of the country, but that still is something that the country is involved with. Because in UN, as an ambassador, sometimes you take off your national hat and put on your international one, but you're still the national of your country. So those were the areas. I mentioned Security Council reform, I mentioned health, I mentioned development like HLPF and ECOSOC, trafficking in person, human rights, the women issues. And if I'm there as a co-facilitator, or to make it easy, like the chief negotiator, and my officers, those who are the counselors of our mission, again, engaged in all these matters, these are the areas where Georgia is involved, where Georgia is advocating, where Georgia is engaged, sometimes more actively when we are entrusted the matter. But even if we're not entrusted with that matter, we are still actively engaged in the discussion. So there is not a single area in the United Nations where we are not represented, or we don't take particular or we didn't take an interest at all. There are areas where we may take particular interest, but basically this is what the United Nations is. And we do it for the sake of our own country, of course, because I started this conversation with global commons. And why we call it global commons? Because that affects all of us. Oceans, for instance. Georgia is not an ocean country. We do have sea, Black Sea, which eventually is connected to an ocean, but we're not an island. We're not a small island state. But when we talk about oceans, today is 18, right? So it's we will be celebrating the World Tuna Day in the United Nations. So one may think that our World Tuna is just the tuna. It's not simply a tuna fish that one sees on the shelf of the supermarket. There is much more. It's the fishing. At times it's overfishing. And what overfishing often does, it's adverse effect on biodiversity. And when biodiversity of an ocean is affected, just look at the globe. 70% of it is the ocean. It is the ocean that gave life, and it is the ocean that gives oxygen, that absorbs the rays of the sun, the heat. It is the ocean that contributes in a good way or in a bad way, depends what we do with the ocean, with the climate change. So if we kill the ocean, we kill the planet. It is an existential threat for the small islands because they are there. But Georgia as a mountainous country, or for that sake, Afghanistan, which is a landlocked country, they're not safe. So it is a global common. So even that tuna fish is a very important thing because it has implications that goes to all of us. So this is where in the United Nations, this is how we see it, how interrelated everything is. So you simply cannot stay aloof. Oh, okay, this is not my interest because I cannot fish. I don't have an ocean. No, we all are connected. So that's why Georgia is engaged in every matter. As a small country, of course, with our limited resources, but we'll try to be everywhere as much as we can. And so are many other countries. In fact, small countries are very active. We have a wonderful place for small countries. It is an informal, it's a forum of small states, a wonderful initiative that started from Singapore. And within that forum, within that format, we have always a very interesting discussion. We do not position ourselves, unfortunately, because that would be a tremendous force if all the small states come together with one position. But that's not an easy thing, of course. But that is still a very important forum where we have wonderful exchange. An exchange of thoughts is the basis of understanding. And then from understanding stems and proper reaction and proper action.
Thank you very much. For that sake, I actually will add that Georgia has 3 experts on the UN treaty bodies, like in 3 out of 10 or 9 UN treaty bodies. And these are the CEDAW committee, so the Women's Rights Committee, and the CRC committee, the Children's Rights one, and the committee on the additional protocol on prevention of torture. As we are running very short on time.
Pardon my interruption, Esma, but we also have a judge in the ICC whom we elected, the United Nations, last year, and he's Georgian. Of course, he's international now as an ICC judge. And there is also a Georgian at the helm of UN World Tourism Organization. So there are, apart from the treaty bodies, there are other Georgians who have international hats and work first and foremost for international community and not for their own particular countries. Pardon my budging in.
Right. As we're short on time at this point, unfortunately, I still would like to ask you the question about the role of youth at the UN, and more specifically about the UN Youth Delegate Program. How can UN youth delegates be more effective and participate and more engaged in the international processes? And of course, both the Georgian and all other delegates, if you can share with us your perspective on that.
Well, as I said, it will be good if the program is expanded and everybody in the UN agrees that we need to not only listen to the youth but work with youth. Just be more active. There is not a single sphere of life that youth does not concern youth or youth is not engaged with. Starting from education. To me, everything starts from education. An educated person that is educated and has critical thinking never thinks in black and white terms. Because there is no such thing as absolutely right and absolutely wrong. There are all sorts of shades there. And if a person has that ability, then there is no room for violence, for extremism. So youth really can do a lot. Work with your own national countries. You are a force to reckon with. And work constructively, because the energy that is with youth, this is an untamed energy, and that energy needs to be directed constructively, because if that's not directed constructively, that is a destructive energy. Sometimes that destructive energy and that disruptive, I would say, sometimes that disruptive energy is good. But I believe through youth networks, that energy can be directed very constructively. And please, please, please work with your own national authorities. In case of Georgia, we do have the youth agency that's been working with you all. I'm talking to the Georgian youth delegates. And I can't remember any youth delegates that ever come to our mission that I personally have been dissatisfied with. All of them have been really great to work with, great young citizens of my country. And you know all of them. I personally haven't been involved in any of the selection process. I even don't know how this selection process is happening, but I see the result, and the result was very satisfying to me. If we have a possibility to have more people, more youth delegates coming for a lengthy period, some countries can do that. Some countries have that possibility to include the youth delegates in their delegations, even for a month, which is great. But not all the countries can do that because of financial constraints, and New York is not the cheapest place to be in. But my short answer would be work with your own constituencies. I mean, the youth, and also with your respective youth agencies and governments.
Well, thank you so much for this insightful conversation. I cannot stop it, honestly, but we have to. So now I will pass the floor over to Nino Gogoria, who will guide the Q&A session and discussion with the audience members. I'm very glad that we have very young members of the audience, school children, school students, some of them even. So this is very exciting to see that these people are already interested in diplomacy and international relations, human rights, SDGs, and so on. So Nino, over to you.
Thank you, Esma, for the introduction, and hello everyone again. I'm Nina Gogoria, current and newly elected US Young Delegate from Georgia, and it's a huge honor today being with you. And with this, I will read out all the questions, but I want to give some reminders to the people who are also watching our live, because I see that there are some attendees watching our live. So you can also type the questions, send the questions, and I will make sure that I will read them out. But for the ones who are in the Zoom call, I will moderate to you to speak in order and also express your thoughts. But before I move to that, I would ask a question that I guess all of us would be very interested in it. As Mr. Kakha, you shared with us your whole journey and how intense it was. So what would be the advice you would give to your younger self? Because I guess all of us being in this call, we are this PQ's generation, very young people. So if you could have a chance, what would be something that you would give in advice if you were on our age?
That's a very difficult question, in fact, because there are so many things that I wouldn't have done had I known. I wouldn't have ventured into those things had I known. But on the other hand, if you don't do it, you won't know it. So my advice would be just do it. Just do it, because there is no other way. The only thing is, whatever you do, you have to be honest with your own self. Because at the end of the day, you stay with your own self. Lie is a bad thing. But if a person wants to, that person can lie to everybody. You can deceive everybody except your own self. So just be honest with your own self, whether this is what you do for the cause that you think is the right cause, and just do it.
Thank you so much. So we got already got inspired. So I would have a follow-up question on that as well. So as you have shared the way of your journey becoming a high-level diplomat, so if you could remember, what was the most challenging part or moment maybe throughout your journey, and how did you respond on that? Like the most
well, that
challenging
again,
part.
There were many challenging moments, and for a diplomat, there is always a challenging moment when you have to make life decisions. Like I was offered, I had an offer, a very lucrative offer from a reputable and very big private corporation, where I could have taken that job. And it was a very, very interesting package that I was being offered for a young man who was at that time 29 years old. And at the same time, I had my government wanted to second me to a position which was also a very important position. Less lucrative, but very important, more challenging professionally as a diplomat, but way, way less interesting in terms of financial package. And that was a difficult decision because when you have a wife, when you have a child, and when you are starting your own life, those are the choices that you have to make. And these are not just because your choice affects then your family. So though, and I had those tough choices to make several times in my life when I was changing places of work, career. In my career path, I had several spheres where I was engaged with foreign affairs, defense, national security, diplomacy, private sector. There was always somebody who stood with me, and that was my wife, my daughter, my family, because that's the power and the strength that you get. I said that you can lie to everybody except your own self, because at the end of the day, you are alone with your own self. And these are the people that are with you. And of course, some very close friends who are also family. Because your actions, of course, affect them in the first place. And then every action that you have affect the rest of the society. It is very difficult to say. There is no correct answer to that. There is no correct answer. You have to trust your heart and the balance, what your heart tells you and what your brains are cooking there. So hopefully that would be a correct answer. Although I myself said that there is no such thing as a correct answer. This is life, and life is to live, to make mistakes, realize why you made this mistake, hopefully learn on those mistakes, because we humans never do that, or we learn only up to a degree. But that's what makes life. So I don't have answer to that to that question. Rather, I don't have a recipe to that. If I look back to my life, are there things that I wouldn't have done? Yes, there are a lot of things that I would have done differently. Many things that I would have done differently had I only known. But here I am, and I don't. One thing that I'm glad is that I don't have a remorse when I look back. And this is what I want to wish you all, because you shouldn't be ashamed of or have any remorse of what you had in the past, even if you had some mistakes. Any other questions? Maybe we should collect some questions, and I don't want to take much time responding to just one question, but maybe it will be best if
Yes, thank you so much for your answer. We have already, by the way, some questions in a row, and I will directly go in an order. So, Balas, we have first question from UNYD from Hungary. So you can unmute yourself and ask your question, and then we will continue with other questions.
Thank you, Nina. So for time reasons, I had two questions. I will try to force them together. So in my view, use in general doesn't owe large companies nor the political process. So therefore, it is very hard to, cash on our power in the future at the moment. So how can we have a greater impact today as UNYDs and as a young person, so that we make sure that our voice is not only heard, but it makes an impact in decision makers, and we are really part of the process and decision making. Thank you.
Thank you, Balázs. Yes, indeed. You may not know all the details of every process. This is right, of course. But you have a possibility to engage. You have a possibility to ask questions and get that information. And I've always seen that when you ask questions, your questions are honest. They're not tainted by political motivations or other sort of interest. Even if you think that that question is naive, that is important because that's an honest question. And that helps uncover the truth. And through that, you can have a better picture. And then with that honesty and with the youth energy, you can leverage the influence. Did that answer what? Because obviously you won't know all the intricate details, and sometimes it is difficult to explain all the intricate details. I've been in a position when it was very difficult to explain to my own public why we were doing things that we were doing, because there were national security related issues involved. And it seems from that angle that something is not right, or we are not doing much. But if you look at from another angle, which obviously won't be able, there is much more at stake. And there are some tough choices. Often, if I may use this comparison, war is a horrible thing, but it is important to win the war rather than a battle. And for a great commander, whom we can name many from the history, they often went through very tough choices, even sacrifices. So from the angle of that, when you're doing sacrifice on that moment, I mean, it's completely terrible, but in a historical perspective, even in a short-term one, you've probably had to do those changes. So it may not be a best analogy with regard to your question, but I wanted to make it this way because you may not know the whole process. But by asking always a direct and honest question, and then engaging with those decision makers and demanding explanation, you are influencing the processes. And with that, you yourself gain more experience. And then, whether we want it or not, you are the next generation. You will take over. You have to take over. So that also prepares you. There's got to be this generational change and this smooth transition.
Thank you. So moving forward, I guess, Balas, you had another question as well, and we are going smooth. We are smoothly with the going with the agenda. So if you have this one question, you can go for it and ask your second question as well, if you would like.
I think it was answered, like both of them. Okay. I kind of merged it together. So okay. I will just wish to give time to others as well. Thank you so much for your answer.
Amazing, amazing. So I guess we can move to the next question, which is from Ramis.
Thank you, Nino. I have a very short question, and that is, Ambassador, when do you think the UN will have a female Secretary General?
That's a very good question. I don't know. Not in the next 5 years, because the incumbent Secretary General, he is the only candidate, and I don't see any reason why we should not have him re-elected. That said, there's been discussion several years ago. Well, this is an ongoing discussion about the UN revitalization. And within that discussion, we've always been thinking how best to have the Secretary General's position, the election, everything that comes with it. I personally think, and there are quite a number of ambassadors who share this idea, that at a certain stage, perhaps we need to have a change and have a term of a Secretary General be not 5 years, but let's say 7 years, but to have it only one term, not 2 terms, just one term. And with that, perhaps also change the term of the President of the General Assembly and have it not 1 year, but let's say 2 years. That was one of the ideas during the discussions that we had in the revitalization process. Why one term? Because when you have one term for 7 years, you are really thinking not only what you need to do now, but also right away, you're thinking about your legacy. When you have 2 terms, that is, you also have this cloud, of politics. And when politics come in, politics has certain exigencies. So you are bound by those rules, and you have to play along those lines. So I believe, and some of my colleagues do also, that 7-year term makes a Secretary General stronger. 7-year, but 1 term makes a Secretary General stronger and immune from those unnecessary influences. As for the female Secretary General, well, we'll see when it comes to it. I support gender balance. I'm for gender equality, as I often joke, because if there is equality, there is no inequality in that sense. It is great that we have achieved, as Secretary General said, gender balance within the UN system, within the high leadership of the UN system. But at the same time, I want to have ultimately any leader there for the merit first and everything else after. It would be great to see the Secretary General, a female Secretary General. And I know that at a certain stage we have very good colleagues. I personally know some of them I would vote even today if they put their candidacy, because I see no one better than them. I've worked with them and I see how great they are as professionals. But then again, there is no recipe. There is no recipe. When should we have it? I do not personally subscribe for the view that next one should be female by default. It will be great if next one is female.
Thank you so much. So I guess we can move quickly to the next question, which is from Julene. So you can go to the question.
Hi, thank you very much. My question is, what do you think was the most important role of the UN during the COVID-19 pandemic? And how do you see the role of the UN when moving forward? And in this realm, how can young people contribute? Thank you.
Well, thank you. That's a very interesting and very good question. This is something that we've been debating within our circles, the ambassadors, the role of United Nations, because what the UN did during the pandemic, there was certain criticism also, and we all remember that. But while the UN, when we talk about UN, firstly, what is UN? In the perception of the people. Often when they say UN, they see the building. As a matter of fact, a wonderful building in terms of architecture, which was built in the 50s and it still looks contemporary. So that was the genius of those, of course, incredible architects who did that, who are very famous in their own realm. So they see this New York headquarters, but UN was UNICEF, UN was UNDP, who were on the UN Women and others, all the UNEP, all these organizations who worked very hard on the ground in every country, particularly in the developing country, helping the communities through COVID. So it's not only WHO, but also these agencies that did really a lot in that regard. What now? Now the next phase is how we restart the world and go back to normal. And this is where the financing is coming, because we need financing for the SDGs. We need financing for the infrastructure. We need to make sure that the next pandemics that may happen, and obviously will happen because they are happening, the world is ready for that. And ready for that, having critical infrastructure, having preparedness. And these are the discussions that is within the United Nations. And this is where the United Nations can use its convening power and also its intellectual power, because there is a lot of information, a lot of knowledge that is accumulated within the UN system, given all these hands that UN has. And UN is now working very closely with World Bank, with the IMF. But what is World Bank? What is IMF? What is UN? These all are the very same member states. So if in IMF we have ministers of finance, they come from the very same countries that send their ministers of foreign affairs, for instance, to United Nations. But when we have ECOSOC meeting or the HLPF, this is where the whole government is involved. And we have meetings of the meetings where, for particularly in the financing for development, where the finance ministers are involved. I said finance because they're always very difficult when it comes to the finance. This is what every diplomat would say. The UN really can do and is doing a lot with the hurdles that we as member states often create because of obvious national interest. Now, where youth can come in is, as I said in the beginning, you can talk to each other. If you manage to have a network that youth from Africa talks to youth from Latin America, the Caribbean, to Europe, Asia, and you generate your ideas, your approach, and you pressure positively your own country leaderships, you are the force to reckon with. And this is how you can influence. And of course, I hope that at a certain stage, we will have more enhanced office of youth in the UN, except the envoy, which Jayatmash is doing an excellent job, of course, but we need more. We need more, and we need stronger office, because there are countries where the population is aging, but there are so many developing countries that has very young population. So that thing is also important. So I'm not sure if I answered your question. Glad that you are saying yes. But again, you do have the power, and UN is indeed working. Not easy, because we are talking a very cumbersome mechanism of having 193 countries agreeing on something. 193 of you coming with a common thing is very difficult as individuals. And here we're talking about countries. But then again, UN has done a lot, particularly the agencies. Where the UN actually has failed is peace and security. And UN has failed in peace and security because of the various interests of member states. And when I say UN has failed, that means locally in different, and this is indeed very painful for those countries where the conflict is, including my country. But UN has made sure that throughout those 75 years, we didn't have a global conflict. So when I say that UN has failed, that's at particular regions where people are still dying and those conflicts happen. That's where the failure is. Globally, avoiding another confrontation, which we could have had, of course, there is no failure. But compared, if we talk about peace and security, where we can criticize UN, because again, for the member states, for the lack of political will on the part of certain influential member states, whether globally or regionally. Where UN has really done a lot is the development part. If we look at it, so many things have been done through the United Nations in almost every country, developed or developing, when it comes to the development part. And the whole SDG idea, the SDGs that are at heart for every country. This is the development part. And in fact, it's the 80% of the work of the United Nations. So the criticism that is related to, let's say, those 20%, it's a just criticism. This is something that worries all of us, and we are the first who engage with that and criticize our own selves for that, because that's the world we live in. That's horrible. But then there comes 80% of this work where UN really, and UN agencies, when I say UN, I mean all the UN agencies, have been critical to the development of the world and to what we have. World without UN would have been much worse than the one that we have now.
Much for your answers. And as we are wrapping up, and we can move to closing.
Nino, I think we lost you for a second, but I think we're running out of time, so it's time to wrap it up. Thank you, Ambassador, for your time, and thank you for very important messages that you shared with us today. You mentioned that there should be more, and all of us agree that yes, there should be more. There should be more youth involved. There should be more youth doing extraordinary things in order to achieve SDGs. There should be more youth in peace and security. And we believe that the network will ensure all that and much, much more, because we believe in this power of young people who, as you mentioned, Ambassador, went through the corridors of the United Nations. Because once you enter that building and once you hear what you hear in the walls of that building, if that happens at an early age, if you're lucky enough to enter that building in your 20s, as most of us, your worldview is very different, and it's not black and white anymore. It's really hard to think in black and white after you enter that building. Ambassador, in June 2020, when the pandemic was at its peak in most of the countries, I remember Ramis and myself being quarantining in our houses and calling our fellow UN youth delegates, some of them that we've never met before, from various corners of the world. Sometimes the connection wasn't good. We were calling a lot of far, far away locations with an idea to connect like-minded people and launch a network that will unite all of us for peace, for a sustainable future. And it's a very historic moment for us and a very important day, because today we see the outcome of those calls during a global pandemic, when we were all scared and really not sure about what the future will look like. We used this as an opportunity to connect with each other. And I believe that if we continue using challenges as opportunities, a lot can be done. And maybe we will have a better world, peaceful world, a loving world, where we can all coexist in harmony. Ambassador, you mentioned that the only person that you cannot lie to is yourself. Personally, that is my biggest takeaway from today's conversation. That is something that I will never forget, because it is true. It is true. You can be a good a good politician. You can know how to talk to people. You can say a lot of things, but at the end of the day, you're with yourself and you know who you are. And I hope that all of us will make the choices that will make us proud at the end of the day of the decisions that we've made. Thank you so much for inspiring all of us. Thank you so much for...
Lika, excuse me, if I may, just one short question regarding the recent follow-up. I just lost my hand raising button. As you have told about the 80% of what was done good and 20% of what was failed due to the peace and security, I just wanted to ask regarding the veto power of the Security Council. This is not something which is raised just like today. Do you see any developments in this direction, or do we see the veto power as such 20% that we need to count with because of the 80% is done good? Thank you. Sorry for interrupting.
Yes, Arthur, you actually have an answer in your question. Veto power, of course, the most important instrument that the permanent members, the 5 permanent members have. And it is because of the veto power that the Security Council often is not able to do what it is called to do for. And because of that, when things get quagmired and stuck in the Security Council, often discussion from the Security Council goes into the General Assembly, which is much more democratic, where there is no veto power as such. But then again, the General Assembly decisions are not mandatory compared to certain decisions of the Security Council, although even those mandatory decisions often are disregarded by strong, powerful players, the nuclear ones in particular. So yes, indeed, the veto is an important issue, and it is one of the components of the Security Council reform, something that's been going on for a very, very long time, and yours truly has also been facilitating that process at a certain stage. And this is to me, if we resolve the issue of the veto power, of course, a lot of things can be changed, but that unfortunately hasn't been done so far. And I can only say how disappointed I am and how disappointed I've been in many cases when the veto has been used.
All right, thank you so much, everyone, for joining us today. Thank you, Mr. Ambassador, for your time and sharing your experience. It was a great learning opportunity. In the United Nations Youth Delegate Alumni Network, it's our mission to provide young people with the opportunity to learn the skills that they need in order to exercise leadership in their communities, to come together, to share ideas and knowledge, work together and connect and use from each other's experiences and knowledge. Thank you once again, Ambassador, for your time. We hope that we will keep in touch. This series of conversations with UN ambassadors will be continued. We will continue on this, and we will have more UNU delegates joining us in the network. You all have a wonderful day. Ambassador, you have a great day. Thank you so much for your time once again.
Thank you all very much for having me. And in closing, I just remembered something from another international charity organization, a motto they had once, which I loved, and I want you to subscribe for that. And that said, it was Rotary International at one stage. They had this annual motto, dream the improbable to do the impossible. So I want to finish and ask you as youth that you can really dream, not just dream, you can really try the improbable, because you can, so that you do the impossible that seems impossible. It is always impossible until somebody does that. So do the improbable. to make it impossible possible. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.